And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. And my guest today is an old friend, Vicki Halsey, or Dr. Vicki Halsey. She has been with the Blanchard Group for a long, long time. She's been a key person there. She's an author in her own right with several books, The Hamster Revolution, Brilliance by Design, which is really a wonderful book in terms of instructional design strategy if you're geeky like me and dig that sort of stuff. Is probably the best in class there, and she's just an all-around brilliant contributor to the world that we live in a thoughtful way. So welcome aboard, Vicki.
Oh, thank you. I'm very young, by the way, everyone. Just note that.
Yes, yes, she started at Blanchard, I think, as a fetus or something.
Exactly. Absolutely. Very important to know.
Okay, so I was thinking about some things that you and I can talk about today. So you have been at the Blanchard organization for how long?
22 years.
22 years, right. So you have seen, there aren't too many places that are much better than that in terms of having a perspective of what's going on, what has worked, what's working differently. So give us a sense just from the perspective of, let's just say, your role at Blanchard, and then we'll talk about a couple other things, how it's changing, how it's evolving, sort of what used to work really well in terms of leveraging and scaling content, and what's working best today.
Well, and what's interesting is with Brilliance by Design, with what I do, by the way, I'm vice president of applied learning. So, more and more, as you know, with your thought leaders who are listening, it's imperative. People don't just want to go, ooh, wasn't that cool content? They want to know instantly, how does this relate to our business? How does this help us gain more business, gain traction with our business, inspire our world to do what we need them to do to get the results we're looking for our business. So I see it becoming more and more critical that we help people in the way we design our training, because that's one of my key roles. I do deliver all the time because I couldn't love it more. And yet I want to keep creating edgy designs that kind of leverage a little different mindset. And today it would be fun to kind of go over a little bit for people, and what is it that creates an engaging experience for learners where you connect them together because you're trying to create a community of learners where you excite them, engage them, but also help them move the learning to action in the real work that they're having to do. And I think, Peter, the other really neat thing is when I look at some of the people you've interviewed, I think of the people who leverage this. It's like you want to change lives,
Yep.
but that requires someone changing their mindsets and that changing their behaviors to give them those results they're looking for over time with themselves and their lives, and the lives of their organizations.
So great stuff. So I want to start with the design because one of the things that we often struggle with in our work with clients is explaining to really smart people that are successful sort of what is this invisible thing called instructional design, because the typical client coming to us, or not typical, but one that's quite common, is something along the lines of, hey, I'm smart, I was successful in academia or business or whatever the case was, I wrote a book, it's a good book, it's done well, and then from there I started speaking, and then I had clients ask me for something longer than a speech, longer than an hour. And just to be clear, a keynote is not about learning from my point of view. A keynote's about being engaging and entertaining and introducing people sort of a little bit of breadcrumbs of what your stuff's about. But then what they'll say to us is, oh, and then I had this client, they said, could you do a half a day? Could you do a 1 day? Could you do a workshop? And folks that are not schooled in instructional design, they think, well, if I can talk for an hour, I can talk for two. And if I can talk for two, I can talk for four. But it's not learner centric. So, explain to us what instructional design is and why it is so mission critical in developing stuff that's truly scalable and built on a solid foundation.
Love that. And you guys who are listening, just want you to know that at vickihalsey.com, everything's free around this model. You can download the model. You can watch a little video of me walking you through. So no, this, just like what Peter just said, is kind of just here's a little hint of what's the deal with the way Blanchard companies have been so successful, because we leverage this model and what's so funny, Peter, is I feel like one of the key people that I wrote this book for was Marcus Buckingham and then Keith Razi, right? It's like, I can do keynotes. But what in the world is this, you know, getting the learner to do the work so they're learning. Because I think what's interesting is we're in the energy management business. As we seek to take our powerful content and then go into a room, who do we want to be energized? Think about it.
Right. You want everyone to be
Yeah.
energized, right? You want the learners to be
Yeah,
energized.
yeah, exactly. It's the learners you want to go out and implement, and leverage their strengths and build those relationships that Keith talks about. So it's imperative that we design things where the learners are getting energized. And so what's exciting is the first thing you think about. So the Brilliance by Design system is like if like the Olympic rings, only three of them is people, content, and design. Now, you think of the thought leaders you work with, very often they're super excited about their content.
Totally.
So, when you think of people, content, and design, first of all, we have to think I have these 30-70 principles. Okay. Your people coming to you are like 70% all about here's what I want to teach. And maybe as an afterthought, they say, here's how. Well, that's 70% on what and only 30 on how. We need to flip that, get to what you want to teach, and then spend 70% of your energy really getting to the place where you help people understand how to do it. You are designing the work so they're doing the work. You see, so the learner.
Well, and I think that if you compare that to a keynoter, they know how to orchestrate to the beat where they're going to get the laugh and where they're going to get people to well up emotionally and all that. But none of those things necessarily drive a behavior change that's sustainable and measurable over the long term. It is an emotional roller coaster. It could be based on charisma. It's obviously based on thoughtfulness as well, but storytelling is not learning.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that kicks into a kinesthetic learner really does like those stories, but then exactly what you just said. Hey, they want to do something with it. So listen, this is what's fun about what you just said. The other two 70-30 principles is learners need to be doing, well, the first one, learners need to be doing 70% of the talking and 30% of the listening. You see, because when they hear their own voice is when they're making their own neural connections to this information, linking to their experience and driving more accountability for action taking. Teachers, as I just said earlier, is and content thought leaders, etc. You want to spend only 30%. Here's what I really want them to be able to do. So think about that. We often do what's called learning objectives. I think you need to do doing objectives. Okay, what do I need
So
to do?
compare that though, and this is really I think important. Compare that to a successful keynoter where it's probably 90-95% them, and maybe throughout a keynote they'll say turn to your neighbor and introduce yourself or something like that, right? But they're used to being always
Yeah.
on, all about them. The entire burden is on me to get this out there. It's my baby. Dun, 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 dun. But when you put that burden the other way and say, listen, what we know is the most effective thing from an adult learning perspective is 70% of the time they should be working with each other, and your job is to facilitate that process. It's a total mind shift from it's almost the antithesis, because if you had a keynoter up there that only spoke 3 minutes out of 10, they probably wouldn't get booked again.
I know. So the thing that's cool about it, like designing your half day or your day, and here's the last one, by the way, just because when you think of the analytic minds that are listening, there were three. The third one is very often you spend your whole time. And remember, I said you need doing objectives and learning objectives. And pretty much people do like most of their half day or day is teaching content, like learning objectives. But you need to flip that to 70% of that half day or day needs to be the learner practicing with the content, doing what you need them to do walking out the door. So you learn fast, practice slow. So instead of, 70% of the time is content, now it's 70% is practice. How many times, Peter, have you gone to a class and it's like, now make sure you put this into action? Bye bye.
Yeah, have fun, right? Well, and to your point, your title again, applied learning, right? Because nobody creates value in the theoretically learning world, right? So if I read a book theoretically, I just learned something from the book. It isn't worth anything until I actually do something. And what we know from an adult learning perspective, that if you can shorten that time from when it pours into my brain till I do something actionable in my real work environment with it, that's where magic happens. And you got to get people comfortable taking risk and having a beginner's mind and all these other things, but the design is key. So again, I love your principles on design. I think what happens, and I'd love to get your thought on this, is smart people say, but I've gotten this far, right? I'm a New York Times bestseller. I'm a world-class keynoter. It's working for me. So I don't know this instructional design. I didn't go to school for that. I don't have a PhD in that, so I'm just going to ignore it and skip it. Right. And, when does that come back to bite them?
Well, I can just tell you a funny story about my husband, who's a speaker. He speaks on the chaparral, which
Okay.
nobody knows what chaparral is, which is basically the environment that we live in here in San Diego. It's a Mediterranean chaparral. It's always burning, everything else. Well, he runs around doing these keynotes, for probably almost 20 years. And so he's had the same person at his keynote he feels like he's seen this guy for like 6 or 7 times. And he's in the park.
It's got a
And the
groupie.
guy asked him a question, and Rick's just looking at him like, like a major, this is his biggest point that he makes in his speeches. And the guy is like, well, now I'm wondering if, and Rick's like, oh my gosh, maybe my wife's onto something, that the one that's doing the talking is doing the learning. And he realizes because he's getting all energized up there presenting, he may not be creating the neural connections that he wants to make to accurate information. For example, how do you protect your home from fire or things like this? These are critical things, but people weren't getting it because, Peter, I've taught down at University of San Diego in our Masters of Science in Executive Leadership for 20 cohorts. Take a guess, Peter. Let's see if because remember in Brilliance by Design, there's that assessment that assesses your learning
Yep.
preferences.
Yep.
Well, one of them is, what is your, are you auditory, visual, kinesthetic, tactual, or auditory, verbal? Well, what percent of all 20 cohorts do you think came out strong auditory learners? That means I take it in, I've got it, I can implement it. What percent out of all 20?
Oh, I don't know. 10 to
I
20%.
love that. 5.4%.
Oh, so you're going to be a 90, whatever, 94% failure being a great speaker.
Exactly. So you're talking, people go, ooh, that's nice, but they can't apply it. So that's why I created the engage model. Because once you know who your people are and how they best take in and process information, once you know your content, the next ring in the circle, which is what do I actually want people to do differently walking out the door, then what do they need to learn to do it? Now we design this session with the engage model. And that's where, oh my gosh, you get them fired up. E is energize and focus learners before they show up. When they walk in, ask a powerful question. They're talking within the first 2 seconds, about what's going on in their world. The N is navigate content. This is where you bring all the best information together, but you're creating all these activities, card sorts, case studies, questions that go up on flip charts where,
Introspection activities,
yes.
whatever they may be.
Now,
Right.
the thing here, one thing about that, I just want to finish with navigate, only because this is where you're teaching what they need to learn, okay? And reviewing. Do they know it? If you're teaching a coaching model, do they know what's the connect? What if someone says this? Are they connecting, focusing, activating, or reviewing? You know what I mean? Like, do you know what it is we're trying to teach? Then you go to G, generate meaning, which is what would be in it for you to learn this? And then, Peter, here's the big gift. Then you go to apply the learning in the real world. Simulate, if you're teaching coaching, all of a sudden you are coaching each other using the model. You know what I mean? You're writing out a
Totally.
script for coaching someone you need to coach. And I'll finish just the whole engage model. The G then comes gauge and celebrate. Look how much you guys learned today. And extend learning to action, which is the 50%, which is where you're following up. How are you doing on what you said you wanted to do with this great new knowledge that I just shared and you taught yourself?
No, that's fantastic. So let me walk you through a theoretical scenario that I've seen far too many times. So
Okay.
again, I'm the author speaker, I'm successful, and I don't know about, so it's not that I'm trying to take a shortcut intentionally or cut corners, or this is all I know is, what people have told me to do and people have asked for and I've given it to them. It seems to be working. I'm getting more and more. So now I've done a bunch of work at a good company, Fortune 100 company, right? And I've done it with, I've got my client that loves me and maybe that's led to some work in their division. Maybe I've touched 500 people or something like that. Then they say, you know what? We're going to bring it into our learning, folks, because we want to scale this across all 47,000 people in our company, in 11 countries, right? So you say, wow, this is game changer, right? This could be zillions and zillions of dollars long term being the expert in X for this world-renowned company. Then you go in and they're going to talk to somebody probably not all that different from you, a real, true learning professional. And that person's going to go through a series of things to determine if the efficacy of what you're putting out into the world is real, right? Because they're going to invest $1 million. They want to see that there's an ROI there. Scare us a little bit with maybe 2 or 3 questions those folks would put out to a potential thought leader that if you don't have your ducks in a row, you're out of the game. You're just automatically disqualified at this juncture.
Well, the first one is there's only one of you. How are you possibly going to do this?
Right. So I call that brain on a stick, right? So, okay, great, right? We can't clone you. So there's one of you. That's lovely. So great. That's a good, you're out. What's the next one when it comes to, sort of your workbooks and that sort of thing?
If you're thinking of doing this asynchronously and virtual, how are you going to engage my participants? How will you even know if they got anything from that e-learning module?
Right. So now I've got the blank stare, the deer in the headlight. Give me one more to just put me down for the count.
Oh my gosh. Well, if you're going to do this, how much will this how much will this cost to create?
Right.
Right? I mean, they're like, how much are we talking about here? If you don't already have this, because remember, a lot of people who are keynote speakers, they don't have anything in terms of assets, etc. That engaging, interactive. I mean, when you think of the strides we've made in interactive online learning, it's pretty cool. Like you can do it, but you have got to be able to understand that engage model has to be in place with your virtual training as well as your face. I mean, people have to feel like you're talking to them, you're helping them move it to action, you're building communities of practice in what you're doing so that you know that people are being effective at the few things. Now, and Peter, that's a really critical thing. As we go back to that second circle, which is content, when you're thinking of rolling this out to a boatload of people, you've got to be a little more narrow. And what are the few things that are going to give you the biggest bang with people?
Right. So you have to narrow it down. If you're going to give me access to your team and invest this money within 90 days, these are the 3 or 4 observable or 2 or 3, whatever behaviors that are. So it's not because I said it will be, it is measurable. It ties to a business outcome. And then someone's going to take out a calculator and say, oh, so I'm investing in X. Here's what it will do for my business. Okay. That equals Y. If Y is greater than X, this is a good investment.
Exactly. And that's the mission of how have you baked that into your design? You know, how have you ensured that whatever those 3 or 4 observable behaviors are, there's a little scenario, they analyze, they click on A, B, C, or D. This is what I do. Is that what they were supposed to do? They get immediate feedback. Nope, that's not it. Try it again. And they practice, practice, practice. Because once again, 70% practice, only 30% learning.
So let me give you sort of the last, because we have a couple of minutes here. The last thing to get upset at, if you will, or to straighten out our thinking a little bit. So here's the other thing I see a lot of, and you've probably seen it too. So again, I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm successful, I'm smart, et cetera, and I'm good on stage. I've got good command, I've got good presence. People tend to like it. And a client asked me to do something, asynchronous and digital. So I think video, right? So video's good. I can do that. And then they go in and they shoot a bunch of video, right? And maybe they say, oh, but millennials don't have an attention span, so they should be short. So I'll take my keynote and chunk it into 10 5-minute little nuggets, and voila, I've got a learning system. Tell me how great that's going to work out for them.
Well, exactly what you just said. It is a passive way of learning. So the learner, you and me, watching what someone did, absolutely the worst way to learn. It just is. It's not where I'm engaged. I'm not doing anything. I'm passive. I can be doing, I could tell you at the internal sponsor, oh, I watched all 5 videos. Wow, weren't those great? But I could have been doing my email the whole time because there's no interactivity. So you really want to drive. And remember, Peter, the one that's doing the talking, the processing, the activities is doing the learning, doing the practice and bringing your fabulous content alive in their world. And by the way, because they're so excited, they can't wait to go teach someone else.
Right. So an effective system might be, here's 2 or 3 minutes of video introducing a concept, some definitions, et cetera. And then we point them in the direction of doing an interactivity that might be 5, 10, 12 minutes or whatever to get them to internalize, digest it, and do something with it. And then maybe they come back a couple days later for another chunk, right? But it's got to be connected to doing. If it's just listening, like you said, I'm going to be, clipping my fingernails or checking my emails or wondering what I'm having for lunch or whatever. I've got to be deeply engaged. You got to have my mind engaged. You got to have my senses engaged, etc. And turning on a video camera and hitting record is not learning without instructional design. So I feel like you and I are on the same team here. So let me, as we wrap up, some advice to someone that's out there that's maybe not at the Marcus Buckingham level, but let's say it's Marcus 15 years ago, and we were both sort of there at that time. What would you tell them? Because they're thinking, hey, I'm rocking, I'm rolling, this is great. How do you convince them, and what advice would you give them?
I really believe that, I mean, the title Brilliance by Design, I believe that your mission is to create learning experiences where the participants, and you have to be so, it's like a slow build to, wow, look what I have. I now see something. One of my favorite quotes: people don't describe what they see what they can describe. So your mission is to just to create learning experiences that to get them to describe a situation, and in your case, thought leader, something you spent probably half your life, maybe more, trying to really get clear on. Well, now your mission is to transfer all your positive energy to the people that you're teaching, so they're processing and coming to the same ahas that you've come to over time, but in a shortened period of time, by creating fabulous experiences where they're talking to each other, they're excited, and they're moving your amazing content to action.
Well, this has been amazing. If you have not read Brilliant by Design, get it and read it twice. And if you have friends that are in this space, get them a couple of copies as well, because it is the best book that explains the power of instructional design and how important design is to learning, that I know that's not sort of wonky and technical and will put you to sleep if you're a layperson. And few people can talk from the level of experience that Vicki can. So I can't thank you enough for being here. I was so excited knowing that you're on the calendar today, because I knew this would be fun. So again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Peter. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks. To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.